The history of butter is quite a scintillating and remarkable one. The story goes that in the hills of ancient Africa around 8000 BC, a dusty traveler made gastronomic history. But surprisingly, this happened quite by accident. Now, how did this happen? Well, a thirsty and on the way, a herdsman, this man, reached for his sheepskin, which was at that time used to carry water or other liquids, but in his case, milk. Then the magic happened. He tilted his head to pour out some of the milk from the sheepskin bag, and he noticed something remarkable. The sheep's milk had curdled. Actually, I don't know if I should say the word curdled since it didn't exist at that time, but we can agree that something magical, or something at least, happened. However, traveling through generations of knowledge and being here in present day, we know what happened. The rough terrain had caused the milk in the sheepskin to joggle constantly, and a result of that joggling, milk. As a result of the milk being joggled, what was made was butter. And I bet at that time it tasted like a piece of heaven and a meal fit for a god. That is basically what happened. It seems stupid, but that's how butter came to be or was discovered. Now, the story of butter is quite normal to us, and the taste of butter is normal to us. However, in Elaine Korova's book on Butter, A Rich History, she revitalizes the story of butter by traveling through a Neolithic era accident to modern day butter, which has become quite a staple for a great many recipes. Older than Christ himself, butter has been around for about 10,000 years. Sounds boring? Well, it isn't. The history of butter is as much linked to the history of humanity as the history of humanity is to butter. But sadly, it's a story that we take for granted and that we never pay attention to. Taking you on a brief history timeline, one of the holy grails of modern day baking and cooking made its first appearance in the world just after the domestication of animals. However, the batches of butter they probably made back then did not look like our cool modern day batch. You could tell that Elaine did her homework because she does not even talk about the milk from cows, but rather the milk from yak, goats, and sheep. And they were the very first beasts that we humans tamed. You know, sometimes I wonder how we did that. Did we just decide that animals were easier to tame, or did we just make the decision based on size? Seems like that is the case here. However, even though archaeologists have dug up limestone tablets that show how butter was made back then, we really do not know how we got from a mere accident to massive production. Maybe the guy started monopolizing it and had a big business until someone discovered his secret and it spread like gossip. Kostrova, however, tells that it is after the trials and errors of civilizations of yore that one realized that we not necessarily need the back of an animal to churn the butter. However, even to this day, some North African and Middle Eastern communities make butter via this traditional method. What always cracks me up is that it even touched the great Roman Empire, and at that time it was associated with barbarianism. However, butter was appreciated for its so-called curative properties, and I repeat, curative properties. This sacred product was used in cosmetics and as some sort of a balm for healing, which was applied on wounds. And I'm guessing that you never knew that. I never knew that either. Imagine butter having a sacred and supernatural past, the butter we eat. Maybe it was just the process of transformation from milk to butter that confounded civilizations. But my friends, they thought that it was magical. In my own research, it was the Irish, the Indians, and Africans who brought butter to Guyana, my country, during the period of colonization while Guyana was British Guyana. And then, just as it is now, it is an important additive for most of Guyanese foods. However, in Ireland, much before that, there was bog butter, which speaks to wooden buckets that were ritualistically loaded with butter and hidden in mossy swamps. Yak. They probably did this because they knew that the wetlands would preserve the spoils and keep them edible. However, this type of butter was likely presented to pagan gods and fairies that terrified country folk. Interestingly enough, butter even got political. One of the first American student protests had something to do with butter. Harvard University's Great Butter Rebellion, yep, I said the Great Butter Rebellion, of which happened a few years before independence, American independence, began when students were served a sort of meal that contained rancid butter. The students were dismayed by the state of the butter served and protested. However, in spite of many calls in the past and now to prevent the ill effects of butter consumption, butter has perdured and is making a comeback, according to Elaine, and this is due to the many artisanal interpretations in modern-day society. The production of butter over the years has produced competent factories and makers that add different flavors to butter that keep people coming back for particular brands and flavors. When our author tasted samples from different parts of the world, she herself said that she was amazed by how foods with one simple ingredient could have a variety of flavors. How this happened has confounded tasters the world over and for many centuries. But just as butter is a humble ingredient that amplifies a meal and raises it to be fitting for a king, it is a magical ingredient that continues from the simple milk and curdles through the intervention to make golden food. This speaks to the feats that mankind has accomplished.